Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. And it looks like Canada is going to be joining in with the Asian Economic Group in order to promote trade agreements and to work more closely with countries like India, possibly China, and other Asian countries that are part of this group to promote commerce and joint efforts at commerce around the world. We're going to hear two messages, one from the Minister of Trade, and we're also going to hear from Justin Trudeau as he talks about being welcomed into Malaysia and other Asian countries as Canada tries to promote goods and services, as well as what services and goods can be sold here in Canada. One of the big things, though, is we're still looking at extreme inflation here in Canada, and how is promoting ourselves as a great economy to Asia going to help fix that problem. Justin Trudeau and his ministers do have that problem still sitting on their plate. How do we fix it so that the average person can afford, 1, housing, 2, food, 3, in cases, daycare? How is this going to make things affordable? How are we going to, is this going to translate so that the average Canadian sees a benefit from it? So, why don't we listen to what Justin Trudeau and his Minister for International Trade speak to what is going on with trade agreements with the ASEAN nations.
Thank you very much, President Widodo, for your welcome here to this ASEAN summit. As always, the hospitality of the Indonesian people is legendary and much appreciated. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Malaysia right now for your support and guidance as Canada's country coordinator here at ASEAN. My friends, it is a great honor for Canada to once again be part of this summit this year. I've been participating in ASEAN summits personally since 2017. This is my second time visiting Indonesia in a year, and some of you may know a number of ministers from our government have been engaged recently in all of your different countries across the region. Canada and ASEAN now count more than 45 years of partnership. And this week marks a historic milestone, as alluded to by Joko, the launch of the ASEAN-Canada Strategic Partnership. C'est une étape déterminante dans notre relation avec le lancement du partenariat stratégique entre le Canada et l'Association des Nations de l'Asie du Sud-Est. Canada is a Pacific nation. The Indo-Pacific is our neighborhood. This partnership truly matters to us, and Canada deeply respects the centrality of ASEAN to this region. Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy and ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific are aligned. We share clear commitments to peace and stability, openness and transparency, to development and economic cooperation, and to an understanding that international rules are essential for growth. Canada is committed to increasing our engagement and being an even more active presence in the region. Last year, Canadian exports from and imports to ASEAN increased by 29% from the year prior. That's great, but we need to do even more. In the nearer term, Canada looks forward to concluding a Canada-ASEAN free trade agreement. In the longer term, Canada would very much like to join ASEAN-led mechanisms such as the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus. But in the meantime, we will continue our support for the Canada-ASEAN scholarships and educational exchanges, the ASEAN-Canada Plan of Action, and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in ASEAN, as well as for international assistance to eligible ASEAN members. Well, these past years have been difficult all around the world, but they've also shown us just how interconnected we all are, whether it's because of the pandemic, natural disasters, or conflicts. We're seeing it with Russia's war in Ukraine, which is exacerbating challenges like food insecurity right around the world, including here in this region. I welcome the release of a joint statement about cooperating more closely on food security in the coming years. Canada can help in a number of ways. We can contribute to food and energy security. We're a reliable trade partner. We can leverage the expertise of our private sector and invest in growth that benefits all sides, including through technical capacity building. We can work together to tackle climate change, and we're an excellent investment destination. We've seen much progress on many initiatives from our Indo-Pacific strategy that will bring mutual benefits for ASEAN and for Canada. As I mentioned to a number of colleagues and friends that I was coming to Jakarta for the ASEAN Summit, people remarked on how far away that was and how long and perhaps grueling a travel that would be to come here. All of you who go the other way to our time zone in New York regularly know that it is a challenging trip. But regardless of the geographical distances, these past years have shown us just how connected and close we all are. Things that happen in any corner of the world now affect every corner of the world. More importantly, things that happen to people in any corner of the world have impacts on people in every other corner of the world. And when we look around at the challenges each of us face, whether it's from extreme weather events, whether it's from the rapid pace of technological change, whether it's from conflict or economic insecurity as families and communities wonder how long their jobs are going to last, whether there's prosperity for them, all of us are facing the same challenges. Affordability, concerns about the future, concerns that maybe the institutions we built over the past decades are not up to the challenge of meeting the moments of the coming decades. What citizens need most is stability, reassurance, and the confidence that as changing as the future is, together as leaders, we're building a plan not just to get through it as countries, but to make sure everyone gets through it as citizens, as people, as families, as neighborhoods, as communities. So even as we come together here from very different regions of the world, we do so with common values and a common goal. To make sure that the promise of progress that drives all of our countries. The idea that the hard work of one generation leads to better opportunities and better outcomes for the next generation. Well, to make sure that that promise continues to hold true in an uncertain and sometimes scary world. So the more we can keep coming together, rolling up our sleeves and working on our shared problems, the more we're going to be able to solve them, not just for us sitting around this table, but more importantly, for the citizens at home, hoping we're going to make it a bit better. That's what gathers us here. That's why I'm so pleased to be a strategic partner at ASEAN, because it means good opportunities here for people in ASEAN, but also good opportunities for people back home in Canada. That is what keeps us moving forward. Merci beaucoup, mes chers amis.
I know. Well, you might have to adjust it for this fellow here, but well, thank you everybody for coming. And I just came back from a meeting with President Widodo and our Prime Minister. Let me just start by saying how thrilled I am to be back here in Indonesia. I think the last time we were all here together, I said I was here sort of 12 times. I think right now, sort of a year later, I think now it's probably like 15 times. So I've been in the region quite a lot, and certainly some of it here in Indonesia. And if I were to characterize sort of what the work has been, the work is really putting into action Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy. But today in the meeting between the President and the Prime Minister, we were able to talk about a number of things. We, of course, thanked Indonesia for their leadership as being the chair of the ASEAN, and that summit's going to happen tomorrow. Canada as a new strategic partner to the ASEAN. We talked about how we are deepening trade and investment relationships here between Canada and Indonesia. I'm going to be in the region equally as much next year. We're going to have 5 Team Canada trade missions in the region, including here in Indonesia. And we're opening an EDC office here. Lots of businesses who want to come in the region. It's really important for them to get the export financing that is needed, so we're going to have an increased presence. We've announced our first ever Canada Indo-Pacific trade representative who will be here in Jakarta. And of course, our special envoy for the Indo-Pacific in Ambassador McKay is with me here, and we're looking forward to the work that we're going to do in the region. And why? Well, this region is among the fastest growing in the world, the 5th largest economic zone in the world. And it's really important for Canadian companies and exporters to grow in this region, and because when they do, it means good jobs back at home. And the region is important for its economic importance, and Canada wants to diversify and grow here in this region. Maybe the last, I'll end with this fact: trade with the region between Canada and ASEAN has certainly grown. Trade between Canada and Indonesia has grown, and last year we saw numbers close to about 30% increase between Canada and ASEAN. So we're really making progress on that front. So happy to take questions from you. Thanks.
For years, there was a bit of a sentiment in this part of the world that Canada was only sort of investing when it was beneficial for Canada. There was sort of a hesitation on the part of some of the leaders. You, as you mentioned, have been here quite a number of times over the last few years. Do you feel that that sentiment's sort of changing? And the follow-up is, why does this strategic partnership matter at all?
Absolutely, that sentiment is changing. In this 1 year, I am seeing momentum, and the momentum is coming because we're working together. When I was here just 2 short weeks ago, it was a meeting of an economic task force that we put together between Canada and Indonesia, where we're really looking at what it is that we could be doing together. And when you look at the investments that we've made in the Indo-Pacific strategy, that's real investments on a whole range of initiatives. I mean, we're opening up an agri-food office in the Philippines as an example. So these are real, tangible initiatives that Canada is investing and working on together with Indonesia, but also with the region. And I think that that's what they're seeing. And it's because of that that you're seeing Canada being elevated to strategic partner status.
What does it change? Sorry.
You go ahead.
What does it change? I mean, we're already a partner. We're already here. Mr. King's already here. To have that document signed, what does it actually change?
It is a deepening and a commitment of the relationship between the ASEAN and Canada. And when you have an agri-food office, think about Canada and the farmers and the producers in Canada, and think about what they're looking at in terms of growing into a market like this. This is 670 million people. It is the 5th largest economy in the world. It's $5 trillion. And what do I have to do working for Canadian exporters and Canadian farmers and those who are looking to find markets to grow, to grow their businesses or to do more export? This work creates, I always start to say, government doesn't do the business, but we create the conditions, we create the relationships, and we cement these relationships so that businesses have an easier way of getting into these markets because we're doing our work government to government.
Can you describe how trade with this region has grown, and what are the sectors where you expect to see the most or hope to see the most growth in the future?
Well, I just talked about the agri-food office, so we're going to have that out of the Philippines, but it's going to be a mobile, it will be mobile and therefore operate in the Philippines, but also serve the entire region. There are tremendous opportunities around infrastructure, particularly green infrastructure, because this is also an area of the world where climate change is having a real impact. So the opportunities to build together on infrastructure projects, which is why you saw in the Indo-Pacific strategy, $750 million put towards that so that we can work with countries in the region on a range of infrastructure projects. We already have technology companies that are here, whether it's an AI or just ICT telecommunications companies. Our knowledge of sustainable mining, for example, is another area that Indonesia is quite interested in. Vale operates a pretty big operation here in Indonesia. We're all working to build the green economy and the green future that is electric vehicles, and in the sectors of mining is another area that we could be collaborating on. But even I was looking at the list. I mean, Lululemon has increased its footprint here in Thailand. So whether it's retail services to ICT to clean technology to agri-foods, it's a range of sectors. But I'm really looking forward next year. 5 Team Canada trade missions. I'm going to work with Canadian businesses, and we're going to look at the kinds of sectors who might be interested here, and the businesses and the services that the region is looking for from Canada. And I'm looking forward to bringing here some really dynamic Canadian enterprises, entrepreneurs, and businesses.
A question for McKay. Are you seeing, and if you can go to the mic, please, sorry. Are you seeing Indonesia warm up to Canada, specifically Trudeau? You got a very warm welcome today at the Palace. Can you speak to the relationship now compared to how it was?
The relationship is terrific, and I think that the Prime Minister is here, Minister Ng is here, at really an historic moment. And it's not just historic because trade with the ASEAN region is up 29% year over year. Not just historic because we're negotiating a free trade agreement with ASEAN and an economic partnership agreement with Indonesia. Those are historic moments, and it signifies the warming of the relationship. But as the Minister referenced, a strategic partnership with ASEAN, which was enthusiastically endorsed by all member states, on top of the trade negotiations we're doing, on top of the trade increase year over year, there's not a country on the planet who wouldn't want to be in that situation. We're in a very, very special prize situation at this moment within ASEAN and with the Indo-Pacific. As you'll recall, the Indo-Pacific strategy was launched about 10 months ago. There's 5 key pillars to that. And countries like Indonesia, President Widodo, are extraordinarily pleased and receptive to all 5 of those pillars. We're talking about security, enhanced trade, people-to-people ties, climate movement, and of course diplomacy. All of those pillars, Canada is investing extraordinary resources, people, time, money, to build our presence in the region. That is exactly what leaders like President Widodo want, and that is represented in the warm relationship he's developed with Prime Minister Trudeau.
And is this part of a plan to be less reliant on the U.S.? We're seeing a lot of America First mentality over there. Is this part of a plan to kind of diversify more away from the U.S.? Whoever wants to answer.
Well, I think every country, every company in Canada is always trying to diversify their trade. That's just a normal thing to do to search out bigger and better markets. The government of Canada does more than any government that I know of to facilitate those companies being able to diversify their trade. This region we're in happens to be the region with most of the fastest growing economies in the world, 21 of the largest 30 cities in the world. This is a place where everybody's going. And I think Canada is so well positioned at this moment to take advantage of the economic opportunities here. This will resonate for decades and decades. So
You've both talked about what Canada can gain from this in terms of access to markets and the 5 pillars. What can this region get from Canada? What when you are selling Canada to them, obviously it's not just like, hey, we'd like access to your markets. What do you tell them about how they can benefit?
Well, I mean, the resilient supply chains globally. This region is very keen to work with Canada on the building of those resilient supply chains. We have one of the largest trading relationships in the world. It's called North America. And our ability to work across the globe in this region with, as the ambassador said, some of the fastest growing economies and countries, dynamic, digital, and resilient. I mean, I negotiate trade agreements because it's about creating arrangements and agreements with countries where we will respect the rules-based trading system, and these agreements give us the architecture to do that. And the more we're able to do that, it just creates greater resilience. And they are seeing the resiliency of those supply chains with Canada, but through a North American market. And Canada, I mean, we're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. We're like somewhere in the 30-ish around population, but we're the 9th largest economy in the world. So when you do business with Canada, think about doing business with 65% of the world, because that's what you're doing business with.
When you talk about the Agri-Food Office, which exports are you focusing on?
Well, I often work with industry and producers on what they are able to produce out of Canada. So we've got incredible new proteins that are being developed, new kinds of cereals and agri-food products out of Canada. We've got a large fisheries industry in Canada. We have resources like potash that's really important, an important export to help the agricultural sector, including here in the ASEAN. But I spend a lot of time talking to Canadian stakeholders, and particularly those in agriculture, and it really is about how can we work together so that what you are producing in Canada finds its way into markets like that here in Indonesia. And maybe one last point on that. I was talking to my colleague in Alberta the other day, and we talked about the importance of their beef industry, for example. Well, imagine a market of 280 million people here in Indonesia alone. That is a market access for some of Canada's terrific high quality agri-food products.
What are the pitfalls? I mean, not all the countries in ASEAN are necessarily democratically elected, and not all of them respect human rights the way the other nations do. So what are the pitfalls we have to be concerned about while we're trying to get a trade deal with them?
I think it's really important that we focus on doing trade leading with Canadian values. You've seen us do that in every trade deal. And if you look at the CPTPP or the newly negotiated CUSMA or our agreement with the European Union, we have key features in there. And those key features include provisions for labor, for the environment, for inclusivity, so that as you are growing your economy and you're growing trade, you're ensuring that everybody benefits from trade. So by that I mean women entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized businesses. It's not easy for small and medium-sized businesses to grow, period, let alone try to grow and diversify into markets that are on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. But that's our job. Our job is to negotiate agreements that give them the kind of access. If you look at our agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, there's a very strong and robust chapter on SMEs alone. We're focusing on SMEs and their growth around the world and to help them diversify. But it is making sure that we negotiate agreements that have those comprehensive chapters that look after the issues that Canadians find important.
But how much are those Canadian values possibly an obstacle to getting trade deals done, especially with the ASEAN group as a whole? Maybe it's a little bit less of an issue when you're doing bilateral trade agreements, but when you're doing one of those comprehensive ones, is that part of the reason that we're still in talks and we don't have an announcement today of a free trade deal with the group?
Well, trade negotiations are complex and they do take time, but let me point to the CPTPP. And the countries in the CPTPP. You have a range of countries who also are ASEAN members who are part of that high standard agreement, very comprehensive agreement, and it took many years to do that. And we've been at the negotiating table, and we're going to work with the ASEAN countries. We have wonderful tools in the negotiating toolkit. Some of them are, will help countries develop capacity for negotiating those particular features that may not traditionally be a part of their trade agreement. So this is something that Canada knows how to do and have done. So we're looking forward to doing that here in ASEAN as well.
Why did we pause trade talks with India, and what can we look forward to on that file, if any, at the upcoming G20 summit?
Well, as I said just a moment ago, trade agreements are complex, and there are many things that go into that. And all we're doing at this point is, taking a reflection to take stock of where we are, and that's what we're doing.
Just one more question for Ambassador McKeon, please. Help us understand a little bit how the ASEAN in general see China, the role that China plays or wish they didn't play. And how Canada can help on that front or not?
Well, each country in ASEAN, each country in the Indo-Pacific has a unique and separate relationship with China. I don't think you can define the whole bloc's relationship. But our role in terms of our strategic partnership with ASEAN does a couple of things. It mobilizes each of the member states' governments to engage more with Canada. That allows us to engage more in the region. The Indo-Pacific strategy is Canada's biggest foreign policy shift in decades to allow Canada to engage in this region of 40 countries in a much more substantive, comprehensive, sustainable way. And through that, we are then, as Canada, better able to have a more sophisticated bilateral relationship with China by being more present in this region. Well, I mean, every country in the Indo-Pacific, their biggest trading partner is China. So the more we're doing in this region, on the political front, the economic front, the trade front, the cultural front, the educational front, gives us a bigger presence in the region, gives us a little more robust capacity to deal with all of our bilateral partners in the region. And I think that's something that Canada will do well by.
Thank you so much.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.